Alright, Ronan MMA, welcome back to the channel. Now, I have been since 5:30 this morning filming videos and uploading them to YouTube, only to find out once they were uploaded that OBS, for whatever reason, had left on an audio capture device, which I have never had on before, and the sound quality of those videos were horrible, so I've deleted them. We're going to try again. It's very unfortunate because I made quite a few good points, so hopefully I can recreate some of the magic that was in those initial videos, just with better sound quality. This first video I want to talk about is the amount that Jon Jones was paid in relation to Francis Ngannous and how that makes me feel about Francis Ngannous and Jon Jones. Now, before we get into it, please like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. I will thank you in advance for your subscription because I'm Canadian, eh? So please don't be the kind of guy that doesn't do the thing that he's already been thanked for. It would be like, you know, getting paid for a job in advance and then not doing it. So please just do it. And let's get into it. So Jon Jones, his purse was released, his purse salary. And now I know a lot of people like to argue, well, commissions don't release the full amount and things like this. But I want to go based off of the evidence that we have available to us, which is the disclosed pay. And it was reported by, I think the website was called totalsports.com. And it was reported that Jon Jones's base pay, his salary, just to show up, was $3 million. Now, Jon Jones is not on a win bonus scenario here. He's got the base pay and then potentially, I mean, we don't know the details of his contract, but I would assume he gets pay-per-view points. We don't know how the pay-per-view sold, so there's no way to estimate really what he would make from those pay-per-view points. So his disclosed pay is $3 million. Okay, great. Now, Francis Ngannous, if you will remember from my previous videos, and I want to preface this also, if you've seen any videos that I've done on Jon Jones, you will know that I don't like him. So it's hard for me to then make a video that is positive about him, but this is that. And there's only one person on the planet that can apparently do that right now, and it's Francis Ngannous. If you will remember, Francis Ngannous was offered $8 million base salary to fight Jon Jones, and that is before any pay-per-view points. Okay, so Francis Ngannous was offered almost 3 times as much as Jon Jones, and he still wouldn't return because he said it wasn't enough money. And I've seen Jesse on Fire talk about this subject a little bit, and he, for some reason, won't say what Francis Ngannous was offered. He acts as though he has some insider knowledge about the number and that number hasn't been released, so he won't say it. Now, maybe he knew before some of us did, but it has been since released by Francis Ngannous himself in an interview with Ariel Helwani. Okay, it was $8 million. Like, I saw somebody in my comment section say if that was really the number he was on. No, that is the number. He said it. Okay. If you remember when Jon Jones, after the Dominic Reyes fight, decided he was going to leave, there was a quote he kept saying, "I want to make Deontay Wilder money." Okay, so he left because of a pay dispute. He wanted to make more money. And I also remember him saying that typically he was making about $5 million per fight. Now, that's probably including pay-per-view points, right? Because otherwise you would ask, well, why are you then accepting this contract of $3 million? And to be fair, there may be some undisclosed pay that we are not aware of. Like, you know, some payment on the side that doesn't get disclosed and things like that. But you would say, okay, you were making $5 million and now you went to a $3 million base and then you're basically relying on pay-per-view points to make up the rest. This is like, dude, Jon Jones is less entitled than Francis Ngannous. I can't imagine how you've managed to get Jon Jones to come back, right? When he was disputing his pay, he wanted more pay. He has come back and is now going after his legacy, because in this sport, that's what matters. And he wants to, you know, become the heavyweight GOAT now, or so it would appear. And it's just crazy to me that of all the people who actually have an argument for more pay, not based off of their star power, right? Because you see a lot of guys getting upset, like that Conor McGregor makes so much money and things like that. A lot of those big paydays, right, are based on his star power. It's not necessarily based off of his legacy. Now, he does have an impressive legacy, obviously, but compared to Jon Jones, that's nothing. Okay. Jon Jones may not be the biggest pay-per-view star, but he is a hell of a lot bigger of a pay-per-view star than Francis Ngannou was, first of all, because Jon Jones's 2 best pay-per-views did about 850,000, and it was his 2 fights with Daniel Cormier. Now, even his fights before that, 500,000, 600,000, things like that. Francis Ngannou versus Cyril Gane did less than 300,000. Okay, but on top of the pay-per-view stardom, or the pay-per-view potential, right, of Jon Jones, he has 15 title wins, which is a UFC record by a long shot. Okay, Francis Ngannou defended his title 1 time in a fight that he maybe should have lost, but officially says he won, so we'll just go with that. And, you know, I don't understand why somebody who was just in that position, you've only defended your title 1 time, feels so entitled that he should be making $30 million when your pay-per-view did absolutely horrible. And I've also seen people complain, well, the way that they promoted the Francis Ngannou versus Cyril Gane fight was horrible, and you know, they were trying to screw him over leading up to the end of his contract for negotiating purposes, right, to have leverage over him. Well, they can say, oh, well, you don't really sell much, so there's no way we can give you this much money. That clearly wasn't really the case, because they offered him $8 million base despite the fact that he only sold that many pay-per-views. Okay, that is, in my opinion, a good faith offer on behalf of the UFC. That is a lot of money. 3 times as much as Jon Jones' reported base salary. And Jon Jones has a way better argument than Francis Ngannou does for getting paid more money. And also, on the whole promotion thing, people have a short-term memory, okay? If you will remember back when Francis Ngannou fought Stipe Miocic the first time, the amount of promotion that Francis Ngannou was getting was ungodly. So much so, to the point where Stipe Miocic was the one who felt disrespected. Stipe Miocic felt like they weren't getting behind him, that they were getting behind the challenger. Now, I would argue that Stipe maybe at the time just didn't understand that the more that they promote the challenger, it benefits you in the long run, right? More people want to see the fight. There's more intrigue and interest built around the fight. And when they show all of Francis's crazy knockouts, the thing becomes like, holy shit, can he knock out the greatest heavyweight of all time? And then it intrigues people into buying the pay-per-view. So I would argue that that was just the UFC being smart with their marketing, not necessarily them trying to throw shade at Stipe, right? But it got to the point where it was, Stipe felt so like personally attacked that when he beat Francis Ngannou, ragdolled him for 5 rounds, if you don't remember, because I saw somebody in my comments asking me why Stipe Miocic deserves a rematch against Francis Ngannou, even though it wouldn't be a rematch, it would be a trilogy, because he beat the shit out of him the first fight, that's why. Okay, now, if you remember, after that fight, Stipe Miocic would not let Dana White put the belt around his waist. He had Dana White give the belt to his coach, and Stipe's coach put it around his waist. So the idea that the UFC did not get behind Francis Ngannou, or that they were not marketing him to his marketing potential, I guess you could say, is ludicrous to me. And then if you will remember also after that fight, Dana White was very, very vocal about the arrogance that he felt was coming from Francis Ngannou's side. And it wasn't necessarily all about Francis Ngannou, it was about the team that was around him. When he fought Stipe Miocic the first time, he was still in France or Paris or wherever the fuck, right? He was with Fernand Lopez and Cyril Gane and all those guys. And I think Dana even said, I think he should leave that team. And Dana White ended up being correct, because Francis Ngannou didn't realize his full potential until he left and started training in Vegas with Dewey Cooper. So there was people were upset about Dana's comments after that, and they were salty, and everybody thought that it was because Stipe won and they really wanted Francis to win, and maybe that is the case, who knows. But he did kind of turn out to be right about Francis's team, because Fernand Lopez clearly has like a blind spot for grappling. So I was thinking about it. I forgot that he was Francis Ngannou's coach, right? And then he was Cyril Gane's coach against Francis, and then he was Cyril Gane's coach against Jon Jones, and all of those fights were decided by grappling. So he's very good with strikers, but when it comes to the grappling, he's got blinders on or something. Now, that was just for context, right? To show or to prove or to say that I don't buy that the UFC team was not marketing Francis Ngannou. They were, to the point where Stipe, the long-reigning champion, felt extremely disrespected and personally attacked. Okay, Jon Jones Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou essentially left for the same reason. The only difference is that Jon Jones has a way better legacy than Francis Ngannou, has been in the UFC for a way longer time, has a way better resume. Okay, he's proven it time and time again. I hate the guy, but he is amazing at fighting. Francis Ngannou had one title defense, and he's asking for crazy shit. Like, pricing himself out, man. And Jon Jones, a guy with, again, fucking 15 title wins. Undefeated in the UFC, despite the Dominic Reyes fight, whatever. Officially, right? And fucking the Matt Hamill one, come on. But, beside all of that, that's all leverage on his half, right? On his side. He can use all of that to his advantage. He was still willing to come back for not an insane amount of money. Francis Ngannou was offered an insane amount of money. $8 million is fucking crazy. I don't care what Deontay Wilder makes. I don't care what Tyson Fury makes. Okay? He could have had an $8 million base, pay-per-view points, roughly, 9 to 10 million a fight at least, 3 times a year. If he would fight more than once a fucking year, 3 times a year, he could be making basketball player money. And that was not enough for him. Jon Jones came back for almost 3 times less. And Jon Jones is like, how can Francis Ngannou think that he deserves more? Like, I don't fucking get it, man. I don't get it. And if I was Jon Jones, I might be a little bit upset right now. But also the timeline, like Jon Jones they had figured out the Jon Jones situation, the UFC, that is, like the contract dispute with Jon Jones. They had figured that out before Francis Ngannou officially announced that he was leaving. They had figured it out. So that means that when they said that Francis Ngannou was going to be the highest paid heavyweight of all time, like, they meant it, including Jon Jones, which is fucking nuts, man. And he was still so entitled that he went, no, I don't want that money. I fucking can't. And then he made a statement yesterday, I believe it was, where he was asked in an interview about this fight. And he said, yeah, well, unfortunately, Jon Jones is in a long contract with the UFC, so we're never going to be able to fight. As if they would be able to get something going outside of the UFC and hold an MMA pay-per-view event with him and Jon Jones. I would tell, like, you cannot like the UFC or their business practices. When it comes to promotion, they are the fucking absolute best in terms of MMA organizations. All of them. They are the best. Hands down. If Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou tried to do a pay-per-view event, which is what Francis is kind of alluding to, outside of the UFC banner, they would do fucking garbage numbers. And I'm sorry to say that, man. It is true. Francis Ngannou under the UFC banner only did 270,000. I would argue that hardcore fans probably account for 100,000 of those, right? Fans that would buy the event no matter who's fighting every time out, no matter what. And then you had Figueiredo and Moreno, like, guys that can account for small amounts of pay-per-view buys here and there. He is not a pay-per-view star. Without the promotion that would be behind it with the UFC, you ain't doing shit. Okay? I'm not, like, I hate it that he's proving me right every time he fucking opens his mouth. And it's bugging me, man, because a lot of people were shitting on me when I initially had this take. My like to dislike ratio on every Francis video I did, up until pretty recently, was not great. People were not agreeing with me. Okay? Like, Jesse on Fire has changed his tune significantly since this has all gone down. He was huge on Francis leaving. And now he's being a little more realistic, and he sounds a little bit pessimistic, and he's correct to sound pessimistic. But it's funny to me that you see in the comment section, the narrative is changing. And I made a video on this a long time ago. As I said, the like to dislike ratio was horrible. Every video I make after that regarding Francis Ngannou and this whole situation, I am getting more likes to dislikes. I am getting more comments agreeing with me. And I am also seeing more people also push this narrative. If you go look in the comment section and some of his posts on Twitter, they are not fantastic. It's not looking good for him. And I swear to God, it's because of the entitlement. Like, having Jon Jones back for a base pay of $3 million makes him look so much fucking worse than he did anyways. Now, if Jon Jones came back and his released base pay salary was like $15 million, you could say, oh, well, that's weird. He wasn't the champion. Why would they, not offer Francis something similar, but based on the disclosed payments, which is the only information we have available to us at this time, Francis Ngannou was promised, or it was written in the contract, almost 3 times as much as fucking Jon Jones, dude. And he just went, no, don't want it. I need 30. He's fooled us all, man. I get that his backstory is incredible, and where he came from is incredible, and all of that stuff, right? And while it takes a certain kind of person to do that, I would not argue that it takes a good person to do that. And I'm not saying that Francis Ngannou is not a good person, but he seems to have a few character flaws that are really doing him damage at this point in time. I don't know who was telling him that, like, this is going to work out for you. I just don't. And I know he doesn't have a management team, which is even more insane to me. Like, he literally thinks he can do this all on his own. And he has no idea about any of this shit, dude. Clearly has no idea about any of this shit. He's a fighter. He doesn't understand the business side of it, clearly. Imagine being offered $8 million base pay, right? Before pay-per-view points, and no, can't do that. Not enough money. Can't do that. 30 million. And then you find out Jon Jones comes back and takes 3. Like, you look like an idiot. I'm sorry, dude. And honestly, man, people, you can't compare the pay to other sports, right? But in Francis Ngannou's case, you can. You fight 3 times a year. You have 3 fight camps, 2 months each, right? 6 months in fight camp, roughly. 3 fights. You've got almost half the year off to recover and things like that. And you would have been making basketball player money, whereas basketball players are on the road fucking every other night. And I know that the sport is not nearly as hard as fighting, but the schedule is insane. And a fighter does not have the same schedule as a basketball player. So, Francis Ngannou, proving me right every time. I feel more and more vindicated every time. I'm sorry if you guys are sick of this topic, but every time he says something, I'm like, Jesus, dude, like, prove me wrong, please. Because I'm not doing these videos to shit on Francis. I'm not doing it to talk shit about him. I just, objectively looking at it, he made a mistake, and I've been saying this for months, and I got shit on back then, and I'm getting shit on less now. And I kind of was hoping he would prove me wrong, and he would get a fat payday. Also, do you think it's a fucking coincidence that the UFC is booking Stipe and Jon Jones for International Fight Week when Francis Ngannou said in an interview that he was going to be fighting hopefully in July? I mean, dude, you can't go, like, you've got to be way smarter than Francis Ngannou. And again, I'm not trying to be disparaging. You have to be way smarter than Francis Ngannou to go head to head with the UFC when it comes to business. And every time out, man, it's not looking good for him. Jon Jones, arguably, like, he has the best argument for making Conor type money based off of his credentials alone. And of course, leave all the transgressions outside the cage aside. If we're strictly talking about what he's done in the UFC, right? He has the best argument for making Conor type money without being able to sell those kind of pay-per-views. And also, Jon Jones's worst pay-per-view numbers look like Francis's best ones. So that's another thing, right? Jon Jones versus Daniel Cormier 2 sells 850,000 buys. Francis Ngannou's first title defense against Cyril Gane sells 270 or something around. Like, he's selling 3 times the amount of pay-per-views, but getting paid 3 times less. I would be very curious to see what these pay-per-view numbers were also, because this had a big fight feel to it. And not just because of the promotion, but like people making content on YouTube, social media stuff, just everybody seemed to be talking about it. So Jon Jones, arguably way bigger pay-per-view star than Francis Ngannou, took 3 times less money. Okay, so this is me saying something positive about Jon Jones. He is less entitled than Francis Ngannou, and he has every right to be more entitled than Francis Ngannou. So I'm sorry if you guys are sick of this topic, but I just can't help it, man. Every time something new comes up, I'm like, God damn, really, dude? But that being said, it's the end of this video. I don't think it was as good as the first one with the audio problems, but it is what it is. Like and subscribe, I would greatly appreciate it all. Thank you in advance again. Thank you for subscribing, and I will see you at the next video, which I will film right now, my picks video for the fight night this week. Bye-bye.